Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 203, titled Holistic Health While Grieving with Elisabeth Bojang. Have you ever wondered why grief can leave you feeling foggy, exhausted, or even physically unwell long after the loss itself? Well, this week on Restorative Grief, we're welcoming Elisabeth Bojang, a functional health nurse and coach whose work helps people uncover the root causes of chronic symptoms, especially those that show up in the wake of deep grief. With a background in ICU nursing and a powerful holistic lens, Elisabeth brings both medical insight and compassionate care to every client and conversation. So together, we're exploring the intersection of grief and physical health, how our bodies speak when our hearts are breaking, and what it means to truly listen. So if you have ever felt dismissed or overlooked by traditional medicine, or if you're starting to realize your body may be holding grief you haven't processed, this is a wonderful episode for you. Hey everybody, welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. I'm your host, and today I'm so excited to welcome back my friend Elisabeth Bojang to the show. She is a functional health nurse and a coach who helps people move from confusion to clarity in their health by addressing root causes of chronic symptoms. She has a background as an ICU nurse and approaches all of this with a holistic lens, which means you are getting clinical depth and compassionate care when you work with someone beautiful like Elisabeth. And for grievers, this insight is incredibly valuable. We forget that when we're navigating deep loss, our bodies are carrying just as much pain as our hearts and our minds. And so today we're going to talk with Elisabeth about some of the physical toll of grief and how we can honor ourselves as whole people. Elisabeth, thank you so much for making time and connecting with me today.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just start with the concept of functional medicine. I don't think a lot of people understand what that phrase means and how it can be effective as an approach to healthcare.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And just to acknowledge, there is no official governing body for functional medicine. So it kind of is the Wild West right now. But the approach that I like to take is to recognize that health is on a spectrum of optimal health all the way to disease um, and disease progression. And so everyone in different areas of their life are somewhere on this spectrum. And they could be on that spectrum for like disease process for mental health, but their physical health is like A plus. So it really is individual. And we're always kind of sliding up and down on that spectrum based on resources we're what resources we have, what resources we're actually giving our body with our diet and lifestyle, and then what we're working with, like our genetic material or our environment. And so um, it can be a little bit complicated, but it really is getting back to the basics of what it actually takes to support our body being able to balance and be healthy. In the traditional or conventional medical realm, they really focus on identifying sets of problems and giving them a diagnosis, and then looking at what medication can we use to suppress those symptoms, or what surgery needs to happen to fix this problem, or at least stop it from getting worse. And those are important tools and they're necessary, but they are still limited. And they're not really good at actually helping people get healthier. They're great for some things, for stopping disease progression, at least temporarily, and addressing uncomfortable symptoms or even, infections. But with functional medicine, we take a more proactive approach and we don't wait till you have a bunch of symptoms that can be diagnosed. We actually say, where are you on that spectrum of health and how can we get you headed towards health and away from disease, um, outside of what medication or surgery can help you?
I love that acknowledgement of health as a spectrum because I think that immediately alleviates the pressure of I'm a healthy person, I'm an unhealthy person, right? We're
Right.
so addicted to that black and white dynamic and to labels about our identity and where we're at in this world and how we fit in. So to be able to say, actually, you can be a wonderfully healthy person and still be working toward a healthier way of living. It's such a gentle approach, which is what we need as we're grieving and trying to heal.
Yeah. Well, a huge part of functional medicine is recognizing that the body wants to be in balance,
Mm.
but things happen that knock us off balance. And so being able to be aware of that, but also not feel completely powerless to say like, oh, I have no control, I have no tools that can help, but actually understanding how impactful our daily habits are, the way that we care for our body and the way that we acknowledge when we are off balance, and then knowing what we can do to actually help support rebalance. So that's, it's kind of a mindful approach if you think about it, non-judgmental awareness of what you're actually working with, but then doing something within your control to actually support that balance.
It's funny you say that because that's exactly what I was thinking about. Where when it comes to addressing root problems, I think people get really nervous because generally speaking, the advice is eat healthier, move your body, drink more water, meditate, do breath work to conquer stress, right? There's the general slap the sticker on and send them on their way kind of advice that comes up a lot in my work. It comes up, I'm sure, in yours. And we have people who are grieving significant losses and certainly layers of significant loss. And when they're handed this kind of advice, it begins to fall flat because there's no inner scaffolding to support a belief that those things are necessary. And I wonder about that holistic approach for people when they are grieving and or even maybe they're not aware that grief is playing into how they're feeling and the symptoms they're experiencing. How do you begin to bring people toward these foundational actions that help bring their body back to that balanced state or more toward a state of balance that it wants to exist within without having to say, hey, I know you think that's BS, but I promise it's not. And here, just trust me, even though you haven't trusted the last 30 people who've told you, I promise this will help you feel better.
That's a great question. Well, first of all, a lot of times people come to me because they're looking for something different.
Mm,
They've been to those 30 other doctors or 30 other specialists, and um, it's not working, or it's working to a point, but the side effects of the meds are, causing more problems, and or it's not, or it's just not helping, or it's not an avenue that they feel comfortable pursuing.
mhm,
And so a lot of times I don't really have to convince people just because by the time they get to me, they're like, they know that there's something else out there, but they just don't know what it is. So
mhm.
that being said, I have a background actually in nursing education, and that is something that I'm very passionate about and really helping people understand the real impact of, like, in your case with your work, the real physiological impact of grief on your body. There are chemicals that can are real and measurable, and they make, like, you can't separate them out from this spiritual, soulful, emotional experience that you're having, with this grief and this loss. There's any separation of mind and body is only pretend. It's only in our minds. So helping people understand that there's an actual real connection, like the reason why you're feeling these things are because your body is aware of what's happening in the world outside of you. It's impacting you, and your body is literally making hormones and chemicals to uh, respond for certain reasons. And so helping them understand, oh, like this is not just all in my head. Um, but this is actually my whole person, my whole body is experiencing this. Um, that actually can be very empowering. And people are like, oh, I haven't heard that message before. And so being able to help people understand that side of things is huge.
What you just said, there any separation of the body and the mind is imaginary is so important because we divest for whatever reason from our physical body when we are under stress and we are scared or we don't have any answers. We separate so that we can just continue being productive and efficient and what we perceive to be resilient, right? And what happens is we then stop noticing the patterns of physical discomfort and pain and illness that show up in our lives. What patterns do you see in your clients who are grieving, but maybe don't name it, don't identify as grieving? What kind of physical ailments do you see consistently that well, this is a clear line to say maybe some grief support is the next step?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I keep saying that every question you're asking is great. Um, so this is where part of the whole education process comes in. So let's just look at what's happening in our body whenever we experience loss, and then right after that loss, we call it grief. Like we have this grieving process, right? Um, a lot of times we talk about like the psychological, stages of grieving. There's different scales for that. But physiologically, what's going on under the surface is that we are shifting from a state of peace and safety, which is sometimes that part of our nervous system is known as the parasympathetic nervous system, and we're shifted into this state of sympathetic nervous system, which is the side of our nervous system that's associated with fight and flight or fawn and freeze. And it's the whole point of being in this system is that we don't feel safe, and that our body is like, okay, we got to prioritize being safe and surviving. And so when you're in, like, especially like in an acute grieving stage, your body physiologically is prioritizing certain systems over other ones. So to get to your question about like which systems are affected, if someone is feeling like nauseous, not hungry, that combo, like not hungry but nauseous, that makes sense because when you are in that sympathetic fight or flight survival state, your blood flow literally goes away from your stomach in the site of your intestines to your brain, to your lungs, to your skeletal muscles, which all are needed for keeping us safe if we're running away from a tiger, right? But like our nervous system doesn't really differentiate between types of danger or types of unsafety. It just does what it does. And so our blood flow is diverted. And if your blood flow is diverted away from your stomach, the site in your intestines, you're not going to have the digestive enzymes that your stomach and other digestive organs make to actually help you digest your food. You are not going to have adequate blood flow in the area where your digested food actually gets broken down into the nutrients that can get inside, that are small enough to get inside our blood flow or our bloodstream. And so you're not actually absorbing the optimal amount of nutrients inside your gut. And so, of course, you're not going to be hungry. Of course, you're not going to feel good whenever you eat. You're going to feel nauseous. And it's because your body is literally diverting blood flow away from the site where you digest your food, digest and absorb your food. So that's like one example. The another example is that poor sleep. The parasympathetic nervous system is also known as the rest and digest. And so we just talked about digestion, so let's talk about rest. If your nervous system is saying, hey, we're in danger, and remember, you've got like mirror neurons in your brain, right? And those neurons, when they see something happen to someone else, or when you know about something happening to somebody else, that also, like, that's something that's like scary or, harm or death, your brain has this new revelation of like, oh, that could happen to me. And that's connected with grieving too. And so when your brain and your subconscious does not feel safe in that grieving process, of course you're not going to be able to rest or relax because literally your brain is like, if I rest, I could die. Like if I rest, something bad could happen. I'm not going to survive. So of course you're going to be like having issues with that. And so those are two of like the main symptoms, I would say, for people who are grieving. And then you have like the secondary symptoms that are both related to those things, like lack of energy, not just physically, but like emotional energy, like you feel drained. And yeah, so those are probably like the major ones that I could think of right now.
Anyone listening is like, oh, this is why Mandy said Elizabeth was the right person for the podcast, because addressing the state of our nervous system is one of the first things we want people to understand when they're grieving, that everything about grief is a threat to your well-being, not
Yes.
because it's inherently negative, but because it is a natural part of life that we have, again, divested from and tried to avoid at all costs, because we've never been given the tools, or we've been given a story that says grief is bad and it's going to harm you and nothing good can come from the process. Whereas what we know is actually it's a cyclical part of life, and we need grief and we need loss to understand so much about who we are as humans. And I
Yeah.
think that what you were talking to about loss of appetite, having that awareness and the lack of sleep, deep, restful, restorative sleep, as those primary, like these are the symptoms I see so often, but there are secondary symptoms that go along with it, absolutely speak to the fact that functional medicine and nutrition support is a crucial aspect of grief work. And oftentimes I think when we're going through grief or we have a loss in our lives, the response of our community is going to be, hey, let's do a meal train. Let's bring you comfort foods, which aren't, again, inherently bad. They're morally neutral, but we find ourselves more geared toward wanting the carbs and the sugar and the fat and the salt. And I think that that, again, becomes morally judged, right? If we're eating casserole after casserole and feeling sluggish and fatigued and brain fog and then nauseated and not wanting to eat anymore, it's cyclical. So how do you recommend people approach nutrition when they're grieving, knowing full well they don't have capacity to take on a whole new nutritional program or an entire new, like maybe it's even financial limitations or food deserts, and they don't have access to the healthier, fresher foods or whatever it is that they need to care for themselves? How would you invite someone toward that practice of healthy nutrition to support themselves while they're grieving?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that comfort foods, a lot of time, like they're called comfort foods for a reason, right? Like they
Yeah.
actually can signal a safety
Yep.
to your nervous system that can be part of the holistic healing process, or grieving process.
Yep.
And so I definitely wouldn't judge anyone for those things. But I like, again, like you said, if that's the majority of what you're consuming, sometimes that can actually be a coping mechanism that only serves you so well for so long.
Yep.
And so recognizing that, yes, this can be something that's helpful, but the longer that you engage in, or the greater that you engaged in a coping mechanism that at the end of the day actually works against your health and your grieving process, it's just good to be mindful of that. And this is earlier you were saying, how do you uh, gently convince people about what they have? I don't remember exactly how you said it, but gently convince people that they actually have more power about their, like, how they can take care of themselves than they realize. And it's really like on usually not when someone's grieving because your appetite goes down, you eat a lot less, but on average, the average American eats 3 to 4 pounds of food every single day.
Mm.
And so that's like the size, like the weight of a brick, and what we put in our bodies, it literally gets broken down into tiny little pieces, and our bodies use that to make our cells. Like it makes your eyeballs, it makes your fingernails, it makes your skin cells, and it makes the hormones that we make. And I say hormones, not just meaning like, the normal sex hormones that we talk about, but the stress hormones. And so it's interesting because some of these comfort foods that we talk about, how people are like, oh, like, I want salty, fatty foods. And it's really interesting because when a lot of your hormones are actually, whether they're sex hormones or stress hormones, they're all made from fats. And if you don't have enough good fats and you're super high stressed, your body is going to divert its energy away from making the sex hormones like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, and it's going to actually make more cortisol. And cortisol is like the stress hormone, and that's actually like physiologically, like you need fat and you need to have a cortisol response. Like we all should have them, and our body should have the ability to do that. So it's interesting. You need fat and you need salt to do that. And so it's interesting how our bodies, even if we have cravings or the things that we associate with comfort foods, we are looking to something to actually fulfill those physiological needs. So understanding that, but then giving ourselves good quality versions of those foods or of those nutrients is just as important as the psychological comfort of comfort foods. And so understanding that, like, that understanding that can actually be really helpful for people. And I want to expand on the idea of like carbs a little bit because I know carbs get like a bad rap everywhere, but our body uses carbs. The problem are, I think we're not as picky about carbs as we should be. Like any whole food based carb, like, and I say whole food based carb, I don't mean the grocery store. I mean like a carbohydrate from a piece of fruit, from a potato, from a whole grain. Um, any of those are actually really supportive for our body and necessary, especially in times of stress, because it's a great source of energy. But if all the carbs that we're having are from refined flours, lots of sugars, and when I say sugars, I don't mean fruit sugar, like sugar that you find in fruit. I mean added sugars. Those things, like again, those aren't bad things, and if we're reaching for those and they're comfortable, they're part of those comfort foods. That's going to be very supportive short term, but going from there to be like, oh, I have to be low carb, like you don't really have to be low carb. Some people it can be helpful in certain circumstances and certain if you have certain reasons, but when you're grieving, deciding to make this huge change to your diet, that
Yeah.
can actually add stress. And
Yes.
so I think just keeping aware, like not judging yourself for your comfort foods, but keeping in mind the quality of the foods that you do eat and listening to your body. Do you want something like carby and salty? Um, have some chips once or twice, but then do a baked potato and add like sour cream and salt, and maybe throw something green on there like green onions. I don't know. But like if you can switch to kind of make sure that you're adding in as much as you have capacity, real whole foods to meet those needs, those are going to be so much more supportive for you and give you the energy you need and give it to you in a form that actually includes other beneficial coenzymes and fibers and nutrients that actually can be stripped from a lot of the foods that we associate with comfort foods.
It's just such a robust answer. And I think that's so necessary to address how the body craves things because it's lacking things. I was just talking with my daughter about that same thing when it comes to like our cycles and wanting salty foods or wanting sweet foods. And her question was so lovely. It was, Mom, are you going to control when I have a craving for something when I'm older? And I said, no, but I am going to help you recognize what might be going on as to why you're craving. chips because it's always potato chips for me. And so I think, all right, well, we can get a bag of potato chips, but we're going to get the small one. And we're also going to get apples and cucumbers, something else crunchy that tastes really good most of the time. Sometimes that doesn't taste good at all. And so I'm like, all right, well, we just plug our nose and put peanut butter on it and eat it faster, right? Something to help it get in because that fiber is so filling and our brain functions so much better with less bumps in the road when we have the nutritional support that we need when all we want to do is, fall asleep and not eat for 6 days. And that I think is a really normal response as grievers. And even when, outside of when our body is normally fluctuating, those cravings and those changes to our appetite being normalized as part of the grief conversation is necessary because otherwise we get into that area of shame and making huge adjustments like you were saying. I know when people are grieving and they're like, I'm going to start the keto diet X because it's so great for me, or because someone else lost weight and I think that's what I need to do. And I have to point out so gently, and it is so gently, hi, you want to put your body under stress where it starts eating its fat stores when you are already starving for nourishment and comfort because of loss.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of times people have responses like that,
Mhm.
and those are responses out of fear.
And
Like,
control.
why did their loved one pass away? Was it from
Yeah.
heart disease? Was it from something that was like a preventable illness? And then they say, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
it was a wake-up call for them, and then they want to change. But often the sustainable changes aren't those huge, drastic diets, but it's actually slow, sustained movements towards a trajectory, again, towards that, uh, towards health as opposed to towards disease. And um, there's this term, like a lot of functional nutritionists, and actually a lot of people, you'll hear this, but like the 80-20 rule, where, that's actually a lot more sustainable than 99-1, you know?
Yeah.
And I try to talk with my kids about the difference between nourishing our body during mealtime versus treats.
Mhm.
Treats aren't meant to be like nourishment, but they're
Totally.
also not bad. They're morally neutral.
Yep.
But if the majority of what I'm eating is treat type food, I'm going to be missing out on an opportunity to nourish my body. And eventually I will start feeling it and my body will start talking to me. And so that's where I think the whole conversation about nutrition really is helpful for a lot of people because so often we're taught to get upset with our body or frustrated because we're having symptoms or we're feeling a way that we don't feel like we should feel. Like you even mentioned earlier about like, oh, if you're strong, like you won't grieve as much or something. But it's like, no, like strength, uh, we need to get away from that super like hyper masculine patriarchy type of strength that
Yeah.
pushes through no matter what and doesn't listen to our bodies. Like there's this invitation, especially with functional medicine, that I really appreciate. That's saying our body is talking to us and trying to communicate something to us. And are we going to stop and listen, or are we going to push through and ignore it? Now, it doesn't mean that we have to do every single thing that our body says, because sometimes signals get mixed, or certain things hijack our body's understanding. Like, for instance, talking about like ultra processed foods, they're literally designed to be more palatable and not filling, so that way you want more, and they're designed to be craveable. And so
Yeah.
those things actually work against our body and trick our body. And so if we're like, oh, I have this craving, and like for me, it's Trader Joe's patio chips, like full honest. I was so sad whenever they didn't have those last summer, but I could sit there and eat a portion of those and then have the rest of the bag on top of it because it bypasses my body's like
Natural.
built-in
Yeah.
breaks.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that if I sit there and eat a baked potato. I don't know why I'm talking about baked potatoes so much, but I am. I will
They're
say,
better than you think.
right? Well, I did write down there's a few nutrients that are really helpful when you are in a time of high stress, which especially acute grieving is a time of high stress,
Mhm.
and potassium is one of those nutrients. And potatoes with the skin on are like a super high source of potassium. So it's interesting, like a lot of times people crave chips, and they're potatoes and they have some potassium in them, and then they got the salt. So there you go. Both of those things are used up during stress.
Mhm.
But it's just interesting how if we actually look at our bodies as trying to help us, trying to communicate with us, if
Mm.
we learn to speak the language of our bodies, we can actually respond in a more intentional way that actually works with our body instead of against it. And I think when we're grieving, I think that's a really unique time to express or interact with our bodies like in that way. And I also think, remember how I talked about the body being in balance or staying in balance
Mhm.
and wants to stay in balance? And if we have a good foundation, if you aren't hungry for a few days, like it's going to be okay. Our bodies, like evolutionarily speaking, we can survive some decent amount of fasts. I'm not saying that that has to be every single thing, but if you really are like in that like a first few days of like acute grieving, and you really just don't have the energy or you can't push through, like if you're not, if you don't have a medical condition that requires you or whatever, like your body should be able to sustain you for some of that time. So that's where it's like you have to already, it's helpful if you already have a relationship with your body to where you can say, okay, I acknowledge that we're processing this, we're going through this. I'm going to allow myself to survive through these first few days. But then after that, I recognize, okay, I need to actually provide my body with the nutrients that it needs so that way I can actually continue on.
I love that mentality of having a relationship with our body so we understand the language it's speaking because, well, one, as a somatic practitioner, I'm constantly saying, can you understand the language? Your body is speaking to you. It's just not in English, and that's okay. But especially because the other day I saw this wonderful meme of like a scene from Guardians of the Galaxy, and the top of it said, what I need first thing in the morning. And the four people that were standing there were labeled like fats, carbs, minerals, vitamins. And then you have Thor coming into the screen and he's just smiling awkwardly and it says caffeine and what I actually give my body first thing in the morning. And it cracked me up because it's our go-to. It's just a cultural expectation in a lot of people's lives, right? Get a cup of coffee first thing in the morning and it's satisfying. And yet there was a season in my own life where I was like, I am so underwater with my own language barrier between my body and my needs and what I'm going through that I thought, let's just switch to decaf or half calf, depending on the day. And to be fair, as a former coffee snob and barista, I know I've offended so many people by just even suggesting such a thing because it tastes different. But the point is, I wanted the ritual. I didn't want the added stress. I wanted to make sure there was something else going into my body. And on the days that I will drink tea in the morning or, get a glass of water and some food first before a cup of coffee, even working out before having a cup of coffee, my body feels more aligned. My entire person is cognizant. My mind is present and able to sort through the day a little more clearly. I don't have that same fatigue, even if I had, whether it was a rough night's sleep or a good night's sleep, waiting to have caffeine until there's something else that I know becomes fuel. It's not as simple as saying food is just fuel and the body's just a machine. I think that does us a disservice and disregards the language that it's speaking, right? I think
Yeah.
there is again a balance between this idea of how do I care? How do I break that fast? I just fasted for, 7 to 12 hours, who knows, maybe longer. And I wake up and I have a grumbly tumbly, and it doesn't mean that I have to eat immediately, but it does mean I can be aware, oh, I haven't digested anything in a while. My body's ready to do that. Let's honor what it needs instead of being married to the 3 square meals a day, the nutritional advice of the past 50 years that I think has caused so much disordered eating, which again is also something that shows up really loud as a secondary concern for grievers.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting too because like we have different seasons. And so, I know people are like, oh, there's like, how, when should I eat? And it's like, some people are like, only eat twice a day or do intermittent fasting or long fast or eat every 2 hours to fuel or whatever. And it's like, man, it really depends on the individual. It depends on where you are at in life. It depends on your health needs, your health goals. And it's not a one size fits all sort of thing. And so that's one thing I actually work a lot with my clients, whether they're grieving or not, because there's a lot of confusion. But it's really interesting whenever you actually start helping people get in tune with their bodies and understand um, how, like you said, how to speak the language of their body and respond to it. Um, in an intentional way. Because I
Mm,
think a lot of times people don't understand that their body's talking to them in the first place and they just power through, you
exactly.
know? But then there's other times where everybody understands cravings, and that's one way the body talks to us. And um, how we respond to that is important too. Because, like, I know for me, if I don't eat enough, protein and enough at meals, I get sugar cravings towards the end of the night.
Yeah.
And I could look at that and say, oh, I just want sugar at nighttime. And I've got a sweet tooth, so I'm going to do that. Or I could look at it and say, oh, like maybe I'm not actually meeting my nutritional needs early enough in the day. And so my body is trying to find a really fast energy source at the end of the day to make up for it. So there's different ways that we can actually interact with our what our body is communicating to us, and um that sometimes you have to kind of play around with it to find out, but it's doable. And it actually, like, once you learn how to do that, it's not about a rigid eating pattern anymore. It's actually about understanding how to meet your body's needs and be responsive, again going back to helping your, like, trusting that your body wants to be in balance, and learning how to respond.
Yeah. It's that more intuitive, well, gut intelligence that we all have access to. And some of us have been, again, taught not to listen or to moralize the language coming out of our bodies and to divest and separate ourselves so that we can stay more, I don't know, insert your adjective here about how we relate to our bodies. Um, Something you said early on, I want to touch on a little bit about how do we proactively approach our bodies to move us more toward health, ongoing as a practice. And you'd mentioned noticing about the nutrients and the things that our cravings are pointing us towards. Potassium being one of those things that is important for grievers. What are a couple other minerals and vitamins that people can think like, hey, I'm grieving. I don't know what my body language is speaking right now, but I do know that I can go get a handle on some potassium and these four things to at least start off on a good foot.
Okay. Well, number one, I would say, would be some form of magnesium.
Mm.
Um, and by the way, I always encourage food first, but I make one exception for magnesium. Um, there was I can't remember which study it was right now, but it talked about how more than half, possibly even more, of Americans are actually depleted in cellular levels of magnesium.
Mm.
And magnesium is used for over 300 different reactions, chemical reactions in the body, and it's used up extra during times of stress. So most people are depleted in magnesium. So there's different types of magnesium that you can get. Some magnesium isn't absorbed very well through your gut and actually can cause issues with loose stool.
Mm.
So, if in your grief process you find that you cannot go, then magnesium citrate would be a good option for you, because you kind of get two different benefits.
Mhm.
But for most people, magnesium glycinate is a form that I really like, because it actually is really um, it's absorbed a lot better, and or a lot easier, and it actually helps with your muscles to relax, and it kind of supports, especially at night. So again, all magnesium, obviously it's absorbed through your gut. And so sometimes if you have low magnesium intake and all of a sudden you go to like a full dose of magnesium, it can be difficult for your body to adjust to absorbing it. So you can start out with like a half dose for a week or something, and then if you aren't taking it at all, and then go up from there. That being said, avocados, dark chocolate, and nuts are all really good sources of food sources of magnesium. You can actually go online and Google like foods highest in magnesium too, and find out which ones you want. This isn't helpful if you are probably like right in the middle of grieving and you don't necessarily have margin to look it up. But if it's good to kind of have an awareness of that, so you can always look it up beforehand and be ready. This isn't a mineral, but protein is really important. Protein actually, like, and when I say protein, I don't just mean like a protein powder, although if that's all you have in you to get some protein, like a protein powder in, get it in you, right? But whole food sources of protein, poultry, red meat, fish, dairy, eggs. Eggs are like protein and fat, so you kind of get, bang for your buck there. But our body, when we eat protein, it breaks it down into molecules called amino acids. And those amino acids are especially used during times of stress. And so, what's interesting is B vitamins, especially vitamin B5 and B6, those are actually used up a lot more during times of stress. And almost all of those sources of protein that I just said include B vitamins. Um, Zinc is another one, and red meat and poultry and shellfish have high zinc quantities. So those are things that I would probably try to like focus on. The other thing is actually vitamin C. I know a lot of times we talk about vitamin C for colds, but I've talked about cortisol already, but our adrenal glands make cortisol and they're super high in vitamin C because they use vitamin C to make something called ACTH, and you make it during stress. And so your vitamin C is depleted as well. And so sources of vitamin C would be like citrus foods, kiwi, pineapple, bell peppers, especially the colorful ones. So those are all good options. And it's interesting because a lot of this stuff you can like, not the meat necessarily, but you can like throw in a smoothie or have as a snack. So those are just some things. One thing I want to point out about all of these things is that, especially with the protein and the B vitamins, if you are plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, these are things that are important to be intentional about consuming because you just with that dietary lifestyle, you tend to consume less. And so, if you know that your body is in a state where it's using up a lot of these nutrients, it's very important to be intentional about looking for nutrient sources that are rich in these things or supplementing. I don't love saying supplement for everything because I definitely am more like diet and lifestyle emphasis, but supplementing can be helpful in certain circumstances, especially if you know exactly why you're taking it and what it's doing, and you don't necessarily need to take it indefinitely.
I think that I love your approach to it too, because when we are under duress, the low barrier entry point is super necessary to honor and not moralize or criticize ourselves over. So sometimes supplements are the easiest way to begin giving yourself a stronger foundation. I take magnesium glycinate daily. And
I saw
when I
you
ran,
smile when I said magnesium glycinate.
I was like, that's the one. I mean, I have like the spray, one of the magnesiums, it's in a spray, but I think that it's so interesting because I notice when I haven't been taking it, whether it's in my muscles or in my sleep or in my stress. I mean, the list of benefits on the bottle of glycinate always makes me so happy. I'm like, this is not a miracle supplement. It's the fact that this is in so many of our food sources that we just don't necessarily have the understanding of why it's valuable. And that's what I really love about how you've described this so well. Again, going back to that, just breathe and move your body more and eat better. The why, connecting the dots, giving someone a bigger picture can be so encouraging that it's not just our willpower that we're trying to push ourselves towards this quote, healthier way of living, we are actually partnering with the grand design of who we are, and why we need to support ourselves through loss is the same reason why we support ourselves when everything is fine in life and easygoing and we feel like really joyful. We still want to eat well because it's all interconnected, and having a bigger picture and remembering, yeah, all of this is interconnected. Your body is holistic. When grief hits, all of that alignment you feel just gets thrown asunder, and you have to do some work to pull yourself back into alignment and understand the why behind it, so that you don't feel burnt out, so that you don't just get tired of carrots. I'm going to tell a stupid story here. I can't eat baby carrots. I don't know why. I just choke on them. I chew them. I don't know what my problem is. It's recent. And I'm like, I can eat regular carrots. Give me a carrot stick. I'm fine. Baby carrots, I can't do it. That does not mean I stopped eating carrots. It means I notice, okay, if I have baby carrots around me, I might need to be a little more mindful and intentional, not just decide I don't like those things, right? Or give myself a unhealthy relationship to a type of food because I'm afraid, or because I'm nervous, or because I feel like bullied because there's a tray of carrots out and I'm not going to eat the healthy thing in front of me, whatever. But I also think there's a lot of pressure that comes along with this kind of conversation for people who, like I said, are already under duress. And I'm curious how you feel about the um, advice about nutrition when it comes to just eating the rainbow.
Um, well, I definitely think eating the rainbow is great. Every single color of vegetable and fruit and plant really offers different benefits, not only to our actual body, but to our microbiome, which is like all the different little buggies that live like on and inside of us. And I won't get into that, but all of that to say, I guess a strategy maybe I have for people is, instead of doing a huge overhaul, especially if you're stressed, just think about like, just check in and say like, what's my baseline? Is my baseline like one fruit a day? Do I have margin to do two fruits a day? Could they be two different fruits? Do I always eat bananas and I always like, I never pick an orange or an apple or a berry, like, so, and the same with veggies. Like, do I have my go-tos? Can I try something new? Can I add one more in? And just, sometimes with nutrition advice, there's like, oh, eat this, don't eat this, blah, blah, blah. But really, if you can just like add more in a sustainable and easy way, um, that's gonna be like, that's like one little notch closer to health, supporting your health.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. I asked because when I was in massive center of loss, I went to a nutritionist in a functional medicine office. And the advice she gave me was so beautiful because my mom was a chef and I didn't feel like cooking anymore. And so I was just like, what do I do with myself when all I want to do is like the fastest, easiest meals? And she said, if you have access to it, I want you to go to a farmer's market or a grocery store every day and just stand in the produce section and find the most beautiful piece of produce you can. Take it home. I was like, your assignment is to go to a grocery store every single day. And she's like, yep, figure it out. This is important for you. I ended up going and picking purple cabbage almost every time because I realized, number one, we never ate cabbage. It just wasn't a thing. Now there is purple cabbage in like every other meal in our home because it's beautiful. It's one of the few fruits and vegetables that looks like that is that color. It lasts forever and it's so good for your body. And I even got my kid to eat it. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not realize just a little bit of cabbage a day, like truly set our family's nutritional journey back toward that spectrum of health. It was so simple.
I just bought a red cabbage today. I approve.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh, Elizabeth, how can people find out more about your brilliance, what you're doing, and just get in touch with you if they want to follow along on your journey?
Great question. Well, first of all, you can go to my website, www.functionalhealthnurse.com. And if you ever are interested in working with me, you can sign up for a free discovery call and we can go from there. Um, Also, I'm on Instagram at elisabethbojang.com. I'm going to spell that for you because nobody ever spells my name correctly. So it's Elisabethbojang. And I am on there as well. And if you ever forget, you can just go to Mandy and get my info from her.
That's right. The show notes are going to be full of everything about you because you are brilliant. And this kind of conversation is so necessary and kind of just intimidating for people. And I love the way you make it approachable and simple and easy access. So thank you, Elisabeth, for being here and for doing the work you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. It doesn't even feel like work.
It's
It
not
feels like
magical.
sharing great information with other humans that have total capability just as much as me. So thank you for letting me share.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to episode 203 of Restorative Grief. I hope you felt the same sense of validation and curiosity that I did during this conversation with Elisabeth. Her insight into the way grief impacts our physical health is not only grounding, it's liberating. You do not have to settle for the vague symptoms in your life or for feeling unseen. There are safe ways to become curious, to gently care for your nervous system, and to begin to heal. If today's episode resonated, be sure to connect with Elisabeth on social media and check out the show notes on how to subscribe and become a patron of this show as well, because both her work and mine is rooted in whole person healing. And that's exactly the kind of care that so many grievers deserve and need. You'll find all the links and resources in the show notes, like I mentioned. And as always, thank you for the patrons who support this work. Without you, we would still be doing it, but it wouldn't be nearly as fun. And I love seeing all of your responses to the workbooks and everything else that comes out as part of the patron benefit. So if you're interested in gaining more information about restorative grief or how to become a patron, again, for the third time, check out the show notes. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.